So now that in the last video we created our prefab, let's go ahead and start instantiating it. So we made the GM object aware of the prefab by creating the transform variable and then drag and dropping the prefab onto it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into the GM script, going to create a new variable, we'll call it public, it'll be a float, and it will be event timer. You can call it spawn timer if you want. The whole idea is we're going to track how much time has passed. Now I'm just going to go ahead and paste this and then we'll go through it line by line. Alright, so similar to what we saw in the other script, we're taking our variable, we're adding time.delta time to it, and then we're going to check to see how much total time has passed. So if event timer is greater than 2, then instantiate the meteor object at this location using the meteor's rotation. And as you can see, we do that times 3, and we set the event timer back to 0. So you can see these are a similar amount of distance apart, 5, 9, 13, 6, 7, 8. And that's just to create a spread. It's not a terribly engaging configuration, but it's just meant to create wave after wave after wave, because this gets reset to 0 and this keeps adding. So every 2 seconds this gets spawned. So let's see how that looks. Now you're going to see some errant collisions down here. Don't worry about that for now, but there we go. Wave 1, wave 2, and it's just going to keep going. Down here you see the collision I'm talking about. We'll deal with that in a later video. This is just to get the basic collisions done. And they're supposed to look meteors, but they look more like clam cakes, to be honest. But killer clam cakes from outer space, I guess. And actually, let's go ahead and take care of the collision now since we're working on this. So let's add, call this ground bumper. We'll give it a box collider. We'll increase its width. We will check how that looks to the main camera. Okay, let's move that down a little bit. It's not etched in stone, we can always tweak this later if something isn't quite right. So since her I-beams are always actually there, just invisible, or translucent, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our meteor prefab and we're going to modify the script to check for collisions, but disregard it if it's the I-beam and the I-beam is not active, which we're tracking with the I-beams active. So actually, I think we can leave it like that because we can have the I-beam object detecting if it's colliding with the meteors, so that should work. That should work. Okay, so first thing we have to do, create a routine that will detect a collision. So we're just going to paste this right in here. So it's void on trigger enter 2D. So it's essential you do the trigger enter 2D. Okay. Enter checks the frame that the entry happens, and only that frame. So you have to be careful if you're using enter or if you're using on trigger stay or on trigger exit. It makes a difference. Again, collider 2D. So you have to make sure you specify 2D. And this is the name of the object that you're colliding into, or should I say the variable to represent the object you're colliding into. So this is just to show you that it's going to get destroyed, but we need to add a little bit to it. So if so if other, that's taking it right from here. So if other dot game object dot name equals, actually let's do does not equal IB. Okay, let's see if that's right. So other dot game object dot name, don't think that's quite right. I think it's just other dot name, but let's see what Unity says. No, Unity doesn't hate it. Meteors come down, and there we are. They are hitting, but they're not getting destroyed. So it's not a trigger. Because notice I wrote on trigger. This was not a trigger, so make sure you check that. You're not always going to want to trigger, but this case you do. So even though you can't see it, the I-beam is actually there, they're passing through it, and then when they hit the ground border, they are disappearing, so that's perfect. It's a little bit high, but again, this is all just the kind of rough coding getting in place. Maybe with this type of system, you're not worried so much about your hero being hit so much as that you're trying to prevent the impacts, like maybe the meteors are radioactive, so you're trying to prevent irradiation, that kind of thing. So the meteors are impacting, but they're not blowing up, they're just disappearing. So let's add a particle system to show them being destroyed. And as typical, I'm not going to go step by step as far as the explanation of the particle system. That is really a video series on its own. But there's a few defaults that I like to use for a basic burst. Like I rotate it towards the screen, and very short lifetime, very small particle size. Change the size over the lifetime. Just not too soon. Let's give it a little color. That should suffice. take that, drag and drop it, and now that is a prefab. Now we delete the original, and what's going to happen is when the meteor, sorry, good point at the right one, when the meteor prefab gets destroyed, we want it to instantiate the burst. So the way we do that is we go to the meteor script, which is open, and we need to add a variable here. So public transform now when we come to the meteor, that shows up there. So now the meteor is aware of the particle system, and what we do is we now add instantiate command. Going to instantiate burst, and we're going to instantiate it at game object dot transform dot position, and it's going to be burst dot rotation. Now the only thing this won't do is, even though the burst will disappear, it'll still actually be there, it just won't be running, so we'll have to take care of that too. Alright, and no errors. And now when it collides, there should be a burst. Perfect. A little bit much, but makes all the difference so they're not just disappearing. And let's pause for a moment and actually save our work, because we haven't actually saved the scene itself. We'll call this level 1, save the scene, and save the project.